You know the routine by now. A new LEGO game gets announced, the trailer drops, and everything looks shiny and fun. You see bigger worlds, smoother movement, and flashier combat. And for about 30 seconds, you're actually excited. You think, okay, maybe this one will finally have it. Then you check the details, and that excitement gets murdered instantly because there's no online co-op. Again. Aww. And look, this wouldn't be annoying if LEGO games were ass, but they're not. And that's the problem. They're painfully close to being great, but they keep tripping over the same obvious shit every time. LEGO is a brand built on playing together. That's the whole point. And somehow, in 2025, their biggest games still act like Wi-Fi is a luxury feature. At first, it's just disappointing, but if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, it stops feeling like a mistake and starts feeling like a choice. And once you realize why that choice keeps happening, the whole thing gets way more annoying than it ever needed to be. Because on paper, modern LEGO games look massive. You've got big hub worlds, open planets, hundreds of characters, and collectibles absolutely everywhere. Everything about them screams scale and size. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is the best example of this. You boot it up and it looks enormous. There's menus full of things to unlock, icons all over the map, and planets you haven't even touched yet. But once you really start playing, and really start playing the game, not just wandering around, something becomes obvious very quickly. Under all that noise, the game is extremely simple. Combat barely asks anything of you, puzzles solve themselves, and enemies exist more as a decoration than actual resistance. And that's fine because it's a LEGO game. They're supposed to be chill. No one's asking for Dark Souls type combat. The issue is that the illusion of scale is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the game. Because the moment you stop sightseeing and actually start progressing through the story, everything moves way faster than it actually should. It's like a LEGO build that looks impressive on the shelf, but the second you pick it up, everything collapses in your hands. Once you see how fast LEGO games fall apart under efficiency, a lot of their other choices start making way more sense, especially the padding. If you need to slow players down, you don't do it with a challenge, you do it with Busywork. And LEGO games are absolutely stuffed with that shit. Because if LEGO games were honest about how simple their loop actually is, people would blow through them way faster than publishers are comfortable with. Online co-op wouldn't just speed things up, it completely fucks the illusion. It rips the padding wide open and exposes how much of the game is just filler pretending to be content. Two players don't politely engage with Busywork, they would delete it. They tear straight through it, and once that happens, what's left is a very light experience wearing a much bigger outfit. At some point, you're not even playing LEGO Star Wars anymore. You're just doing chores for Darth Vader, and the game is desperately hoping you don't realize how thin everything feels once the distractions are gone. And once you say all of that out loud, the defense shows up immediately. Not from the studio, but from fans, from commenters, and from people trying to sound reasonable. Well, they did try online co-op before. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that. Yeah, they did. They poked at online co-op in a couple of their older games, and it was rough. It was laggy, it was clunky, and it was treated like a checkbox instead of something they actually wanted to make work. And here's the part people love to skip over. It wasn't rough because online co-op is impossible. It was rough because LEGO games are fundamentally built around proximity, around shared cameras, and around artificial friction. The moment players aren't glued together, the design starts falling apart immediately. Online co-op didn't break those games, it exposed them. It showed how little resistance there is once the training wheels come off, how quickly the illusion collapses when players aren't being slowed down on purpose. And instead of looking at that and going, okay, maybe the core design needs to change, the response was basically cool. Let's not touch that again. Which is insane! Because we tried it once and it was messy isn't a lesson, it's an excuse. especially when every other multiplayer system in gaming got better by evolving instead of running away the first time something didn't work perfectly. LEGO games did evolve, just not here. They refined visuals, streamlined progression, smooth accessibility, but when it came to online co-op, they didn't evolve. They just retreated. Not because the idea was bad, but because fixing it would have required admitting that the underlying design wasn't as deep as it pretends to be. So no, those early attempts don't prove that online co-op can't work. They prove exactly why LEGO games most likely don't want them to. And this is usually the part where people try to pull out the big guns, and someone will say something like, well, LEGO games are for kids. Like that actually explains anything. But that idea collapses the moment you look at what kids are already trusted with. Because kids aren't playing simple games. They're navigating online systems full of social features, live updates, and complex player economies. Games like Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, and Mario Kart are all online. They're all social, and they're all far more complex than simply dropping into a LEGO level with a friend. So the absence of online LEGO co-op isn't about age, and it's definitely not about protecting kids. Because if that were the case, then these other games wouldn't exist the way that they do. The truth is much simpler and a lot less flattering. Online co-op adds friction you can't control and creates headaches that go beyond the game itself. From moderation and matchmaking to network hiccups and tricky design problems. Local co-op doesn't have any of that. There are no servers to run, no long-term systems to maintain, and no responsibility once the game is sold. So when people say it's for kids, what they really mean is that the experience isn't worth the complexity. LEGO games are built around cooperation, shared problem solving, and shared happiness, but they stop short of letting that cooperation exist beyond the couch. Not out of concern, but out of convenience. And once you see that, the excuse stops sounding protective and starts sounding like exactly what it is. And that's a justification for not trying, which brings us to why couch co-op survives the way it does. Couch co-op is safe. Couch co-op doesn't need to try. It keeps players slow, stuck in the same space, and forced into messy, inefficient progression. You're stuck sharing a camera, glued together. And half of the time, it feels like the screen itself is trying to decide which one of you it hates more. And that friction isn't a bug, it's an intentional feature. It stretches playtime without making the game harder or deeper. Most of the time, you're not solving puzzles, you're negotiating space, bumping into each other, and wrestling with the game's limits. Online co-op would tear all of that apart. Without a shared camera or forced proximity, players naturally would split up. They would naturally find faster routes and clear objectives with precision and efficiency. And just like that, the illusion of a big, grand game disappears. And here's the part that makes all of it linger longer than it should. They keep getting away with it! Not because players don't notice, and it's not because people aren't asking for it, but because LEGO games still sell. They still get decent reviews, and parents still buy them without hesitation. But at the same time, nostalgia does most of the work before anyone even glances at the feature list. From the outside, nothing looks broken, and there's no emergency or real pressure because the games succeed in the one way that actually matters to publishers. And that success makes every other complaint feel optional. Meanwhile, the audience asking for online co-op, the older fans who grew up with these games, they're loud, but they're not the ones driving the numbers. And expectations like ours don't show up in the spreadsheets. All the data says is that people bought it anyway, and because of that, there's no real incentive to change. Rebuilding systems is expensive. Rethinking formula is risky, and exposing the cracks doesn't help when the current version is already considered to be good enough. And that's why this doesn't feel like just a missing feature anymore. It feels like a decision. LEGO games don't need to become something totally different. They don't need to chase trends or turn into live service machines. They don't even need to be bigger than what they already are. They just need to be honest about what they are and who they're for. Online co-op wouldn't ruin LEGO games, but it also wouldn't magically fix everything. It would push them to grow in ways they've been avoiding for a long time. But instead of taking that step, the series keeps choosing comfort, familiarity, and just enough progress to look modern without ever really moving forward. Which is fucked up, because these games are still fun, they're still charming, and they're still built around the idea of playing together. They just haven't caught up to the way people actually play games anymore. And until that changes, LEGO games will keep feeling like they're almost there, but never quite willing to take that last step. Maybe one day they'll get there, and maybe one day we'll see online co-op done right in a LEGO game, but just not tonight.
When I fall asleep, I wake up in my own world. I might just pop through the town. I might go out with your girl. I could be battling demons. I might just change up the seasons. I imagine what I see.